Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So here is where we okay. So we are going to go here. This is where we left off yesterday. And of course, we now have a situation where God and Moses have had this dialogue, and Moses has pleaded with God, and essentially they're not going to be wiped out in one fell swoop, but it's essentially they're going to die slowly, and we're going to get the details of that today. So, V'ha'amaleki v'ha'kna'ani yoshev ba'emek, the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valley. Machar pnu u'se'u lachem. Tomorrow, turn and journey for yourselves. Hamidbar, back to the wilderness, right towards the wilderness. Derech Yam Suf, in the direction of the Red Sea. So here we are. So basically, God is saying, they thought they weren't going to be able to overcome them. Well, guess what? Now they aren't, because they've rejected God, essentially. So what about the Amalekites, etc.? Im telchu sham. If in fact you now try to go in the direction of the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, yahargu otchem, they will kill you. Ma'achar, why? Since Heini imechem, I'm not with you. God is saying to them, I'm no longer with you. Machar pnu, tomorrow, face, literally it means, right? La'achorechem. In other words, you need to go in the reverse direction. Usa'ulachem, and journey. Go ahead and journey. In the reverse, you have to reverse your direction. And now we're
I have a question.
Yes.
I understand that that's literally turn back and go back towards the desert and away from Israel.
Right.
But since we're talking about their having turned away from God, is there any room to interpret that as turn back toward me?
Unfortunately not, because of that's the ultimate implication of the punishment, right? They're getting punished because of what they did. And the purpose, and I wish it worked better than it really does, is for people to say, oh my gosh, this is not a good mistake. I need to change my direction. And, and essentially that's the way I would rather look at adversity and say, what is this trying to teach me? But you'll see. What's happened is, there's only so much you can keep doing the same thing again and again and again and again. At a certain point, you're going to have to pay the price. And hopefully at that point, learn. And who knows, Lauren, the interesting question I think you're raising is, had they really done tshuva? But you'll see that they still don't want to do tshuva. We haven't come to that point yet. We may not make it this week, but we may. It's all going to come up. So if you want me to give you a spoiler, I'll tell you that, they feel bad about the consequences. And so now they try to go in the other direction, right? But it's too late. That's not what you do. So the issue is, are you willing to listen? Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to are you willing to comply? Are you willing to submit to divine authority? Whichever way it goes, regardless of your own personal consequences. And I will tell you this, that I have heard that the 40 years actually, in many ways, they still led, if you want to say it this way, productive lives. That there were actually many great things that happened to them during those 40 years. I can't tell you the source of that, but I know I did hear it because it was so surprising, and so I remembered it. So here we go. Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aharon lemor. So Hashem spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, And this is the verse that we can circle in terms of a minyan. Ad matai, for how long, la eda hara'ah hazot, and that's the word. Eda is a community. For how long this wicked community? So in other words, how long are they going to keep doing this? But we are going to see that Eda, this is a reference. I'm going to anticipate what Rashi is going to tell us, and he's quoting from the Gemara, that there's a deduction that this is referring to the 10 spies. Okay. Asher Hema, and this would be one reason why we would think that it's referring to the spies. Asher Hema, in that they, Hema, they, Malilim alai, they cause to murmur against me. Et tlunot b'nei Yisrael, the mutterings of the children of Israel. Asher Hema Malilim alai, inasmuch as they caused them to murmur against me, I have heard. So, in other words, that these 10 men caused this amazing tragedy. So let's take a look at the Rashi. La Eda Hara'ad, etc. This wicked community. Elu HaMeraglim. So Rashi says it very clearly. This is referring to the 10 spies. And this is from, he gives you the reference in the Gemara. So it's Megillah, Tractate Megillah, page 23b. Mikan, and he says it, from this we infer, la Eda, the word Eda, shehi asara, that the smallest number that you can have for a community is 10. So that's it. So this verse, this is the verse that informs us regarding a minyan. Asher hema malinim. In other words, inasmuch as they cause to murmur, cause to mutter against et Yisrael. Rashi is just going on, the Israelites, ally against me. Et lumot b'nei Yisrael asher hema malinim, the complaints of the children of Israel, which they complain, in which they are complaining. HaMeraglim, and Rashi just puts us in straightforward Hebrew, because the Hebrew here is not straightforward. So he says, HaMeraglim, the spies, Malinim otam, cause them to murmur. They incite them, right, to murmur, ally against me. Shamati, I have heard this. In other words, I have seen the evidence. Onwards, Emor Alehem, say to them, Chai ani ne'um Hashem. So this is God swearing, taking an oath, right? As I live, says Hashem. And again, in Hebrew, the way it's stated is negatively. We don't use this kind of syntax in English. Literally, it means, if not as I spoke, im lo ka'asher dibartem, sorry, if not as you spoke, but oznai, in my ears, ken e'eselachem, so I will do for you. And this is where a certain car company got its slogan of, you asked for it, you got it. This is what God is saying to them. In other words, I swear, positively saying in English, I swear that I will do as you yourselves spoke. You said it, this is what's going to happen. You asked for it, you got it. Chai ani, lashon shvuah. So Rashi says, Chai ani, as I live, is a expression of taking an oath, making an oath. Im lo v'gomer kein aseh. So what's trying to sort of tease out the syntax here? Kivyachol is a word that we use when we're saying something that we don't believe is true about God. So here it's as if I were not existent, as if I didn't exist, right? Ka'asher dibartem. In other words, this wouldn't happen if I weren't to exist. This wouldn't happen to you. The fact that it is going to happen to you is, in a sense, evidence of my existence. which is fundamental. I mean, it's a precondition for every other kind of existence. Kasher dibartem, just as you spoke. She bikashtem mimeni, you asked of me, or bamidbar hazeh. They use the words or in this wilderness, lu matnu, were we not to die, right? If we could only die in this wilderness. And you may recollect a few sessions ago, we read that phrase that they used. When they heard what the spies told them, they became so upset about it. They said it would be better for us to die in this desert than to have to try and conquer the land of Canaan. So God's saying, okay, that's what you wanted. And how's this work again? Okay. Bamidbar hazeh, in this wilderness, yiplu pigrechem, your corpses will fall. Yeah, David.
Yeah, I had a question about the number 10. So again, why? I mean, it seems like we picked there's a very negative connotation now with community. So so anything about that, or if I missed something, because it doesn't seem right that we've now formed community based on such a negative event.
No. We raised this issue yesterday. At least I raised this issue yesterday. It's okay. I didn't really go into it very deeply. So there are a few different approaches that you can take. One is, this is simply a question of definition. In other words, let's separate it out from the circumstances. It's simply the usage of a word, the word Edah. And since the word Edah is being referenced to 10 men, and by the way, of course, traditionally, a minyan was 10 men. And here, based fully on the fact that here it is 10 men. All right. So that was the understanding there. So moving away from the sort of very fundamental statement that this is simply defining Edah. Don't worry about the context, other than it is 10 men, right? And that's the definition. We did sort of raise some other issues involved. One is, I mean, there's a prayer that we say at the very beginning of the service, where we say, we address God and say, not because of our merits are we coming before you. In other words, I think part of what is perhaps ill about the world today, spiritually, to the degree that we seem to be heading in a very bad direction, is a lack of modesty and a lack of humility and a sense that we really could be doing a lot better. And when you feel like you need to improve, when you recognize ways in which you could be performing better, at least it's a start towards improving. And one of the great effects, I'm not saying it's a necessary consequence, but it is a consequence. It can be a consequence, and it appears to be a consequence, that when you don't recognize that there is something greater, that there's a greater reality that we need to answer to, and that whatever you want to do is okay, that you're the arbiter and you're the basis of what is right and what is wrong. Unfortunately, there are people, perhaps even many people, who will simply try and get away with murder. And we see it actually happening, literally getting away with murder. And so the fact that we're using a minyan in which to come to services and hopefully offer up our prayers as sincerely as we can, it needs to come from an attitude of submission. I may have mentioned this before, that the very word Islam actually translates as submission. And modernity and a modern Western attitude, and that's only because I can only speak to what extent I can about a Western attitude, is the reverse of that, right? It's the forgive me for saying it one more time, ain't no one gonna tell me what to do. And so that could be another reason why from this is what was happening here, right? This is exactly what was happening. Yeah.
I thought that the root of the word Islam was related to shalom or salam, and Am I wrong, or are those two connected, submission and salam?
So I know I've wondered about it myself, Lauren. So I don't know. And again, my information may have been wrong, but that is my understanding of the term. I actually read it somewhere that the word Islam means submission.
And I read it somewhere that it's related to salam. So,
Right,
but
so-
I don't know. I mean, it's possible that those two things are connected, or it's possible that only one of those is correct, and I don't know.
Yes. So the reason why I kind of like where I'm coming from is who would have thought it, right? Whereas translating it as having something to do with peace is more obvious if you know something about Hebrew. The only
well,
I was trying
in Arabic too.
Yeah, well, I know a lot less Arabic than I do, and I
But
know
you know salam, right?
Yes, I
But
do.
you know the word salam, yeah.
Right, right. Incidentally, the only connection I could make, and I was thinking about it as we were talking about it, is that if you want to have peace, you do have to submit to some extent. If you want to have your own way the whole time, don't ask for peace at the same time, right? I mean, just look at the situation in the Middle East. Unless both sides are willing to submit to some extent to what the other side wants, you're not going to have peace. So that's the connection I could make. But as I said, this is
thanks for the explanation. That helps a lot in terms of looking at looking at it from the definition itself versus the other items that you raised. So thanks for the recap. I appreciate it. So
sure, no problem. No, we didn't go into this kind of detail yesterday. Going on here. So we were just worked on the translation right on this. Yeah, we were just started working on this. So again, back to the verse 29. Bamidbar hazeh yiplu pigrechem. Your corpses will fall in this wilderness. V'chol pegudechem, and all your lists, l'chol misparchem, according to all your numbers, miben esrim shana v'mala, from 20 years old and up, asher halinotem. So here the word asher means those who murmured, right, against me. Yeah, those who murmured against me, period. See if we start the Rashi a little. Let me just get this a little bit smaller. Right, there it is. By the way, I learned something in this Rashi that I was not aware of before. So we'll see. Right? And all your lists according to your numbers, right? And this is from Baba Batra, page 121, one of the tractates in the Talmud. Baba Batra means the lost gate. Baba is an Aramaic word that means gate. Kol hanimna, all those counted, l'chol mispar, for all the numbers, right? She'atim nimnim bo, with which you counted. Kigon, for example, latzet, in other words, the purpose for which you counted, latzet ve'lavo latzava, in other words, to go out or to come in the army, v'latet shkalim, and to give the shekels, the half shekels, kol hamenuyim, all those who were counted, l'chol otan misparot, according to all those countings, all those numbers, yamutu, they will die. The eluhain, and referring to those that were mibin kaf shana, who were 20 years old and up. Lehotzi, and this is the thing I didn't realize until I read this Rashi again. So it just didn't penetrate in previous readings, to exclude Shivto Shel Levi, the tribe of Levi, she'en pekudehem miben esrim, because when they were counted, they were not counted from 20 years old. So all the other Israelites passed on, but that were 20 years old and up, except for the tribe of Levi. So a lot more people, in other words, who were older wound up in the land of Canaan in that situation. Didn't realize it did not include the children of Levi, and you'll see why too. There's some supporting evidence as to that interpretation, right? This is a continuation of this oath, right? Im atem tavo'u el haaretz. If you should enter, you should come into the land. Asher nasati et yadi. Literally, it means which. Literally, it is which, concerning which I lifted my hand. I raised my hand, and we know that today that is one way of formally taking an oath, and that's exactly what this is referring to. That I swore l'shachen etchem ba, to cause you to dwell in her, in this land. Ki im Kalev ben Yefuneh, except for Kalev son of Yefuneh, Yoshua ben Nun, and Joshua son of Nun, right? Because they were more than 20 years old in the counting, but they were going to be an exception. Let's see if there's any Rashi on this. There is not, until 32. V'tapchem, and as for your children, right? Asher amartem lavaziyeh, about whom you said, lavaziyeh, they shall be a spoil. In other words, they'll be carried off. They'll be booty. Veheveti otam, I shall bring them. Indeed, I shall bring them. V'yad'u et haaretz, and they shall know the land. Asher ma'astem ba, which you spurned, which you rejected. Ufigrechem atem. Again, the Hebrew is sort of unusual here. It means, and your corpses, you, right? But so Rashi explains the sort of unusual syntax here. Yiplu will fall bamidbar hazeh, in this wilderness. So the u here, the vav, and it really would mean but your corpses, right? Your children will experience the land, but you're going to die in this wilderness. So let's take a look at the Rashi. Ufigrechem atem. So he says, ketargumo, according to the Aramaic translation, dilchon, meaning yours. Atem means it's sort of the accusative case of you. Lefi, so he explains, Lefi shediber al habanim, because the text was speaking about the children, lahachnisan laaretz, to bring them into the land. Uvikesh lomar va'atem tamutu, and he wanted to say, but you will die. Nofel lashon. So there, atem. Do you see the word atem? Nofel lashon ze kan. So he says it's appropriate to use this expression here to say and to use the word atem, because he says va'atem, but you, right? And that's why we're using the you in the accusative case. And normally you just would leave out the word, right? Ufigrochem, and your corpses will fall in this desert. Okay, it is time, so I am going to have to stop here and at this sort of weird place, but we're going to have to do it. So I'm going to mark the spot, and okay, yes, go ahead. Before I start the recording.
If there's one more person present, we would have a minyan for Kaddish.
Okay. Well, let me stop the share and stop the recording.